I got the email from my mother while I was halfway through a 12-hour shift at the warehouse. The subject line was simple. We need to discuss your future. I'm Ethan, 29, a logistics supervisor in Boise, Idaho. I'd been grinding for years, clawing my way up from a temp gig to a salaried position with benefits. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it until my break, sitting in the break room with a stale coffee and a protein bar. The email was longer than Mom's usual messages, formal, like she'd rehearsed it. She wrote about family duty, legacy, and how it was time for me to step up. At the bottom, she dropped the bomb. They'd arranged a marriage for me. Her name was Clara, 26, daughter of my father's business partner, Victor Hargrove. The wedding was set for next spring. No discussion, no question, just a date and a name. I read it twice, my jaw tight, coffee forgotten. My parents, David and Margaret, had always been controlling private schools, approved hobbies, curated friends, but this was a new level. I didn't reply. I finished my shift, drove home to my one-bedroom apartment, and sat on my couch, staring at the wall. That night, I typed one word in response. No. I hit send and turned off my phone. The next morning, my father called. I let it go to voicemail. Ethan, this isn't optional. His voice boomed through the speaker. You're not getting younger and the family needs this. Clara's a good match. Call me back by tonight. I didn't. Instead, I went to work, kept my head down and started thinking. I wasn't naive. My parents owned a chain of hardware stores across the Northwest, a small empire they built from my grandfather's single shop. I'd worked there as a teenager, stocking shelves, learning the business, but I'd walked away at 20. I wanted my own life, not their blueprint. They never forgave me for it. By noon, my mother texted, "We're coming to Boise tomorrow. Be ready to talk." I didn't respond. I knew what talk meant. A lecture, maybe tears from Mom, definitely ultimatums from Dad. I spent my lunch break Googling Clara Hargrove. She was polished, a marketing grad from Gonzaga, now working for her father's real estate firm. LinkedIn photos showed her smiling at charity galas, always with the same poised expression. Nothing wrong with her, but I didn't know her and I didn't want to. The idea of marrying a stranger to cement some business deal made my skin crawl. That night, I called my best friend, Marcus, a mechanic who'd known me since high school. We met at a dive bar, splitting a pitcher of cheap beer. "They're serious?" he asked, wiping foam from his lip. "Dead serious," I said. "They've got a date picked out, probably the venue too." Marcus leaned back, whistling low. "What's your play?" I shrugged. "Not marrying her, that's for sure." He grinned. "That's my boy. But you know they'll make it hurt." I nodded. Marcus knew my parents, knew their money came with strings, knew they'd cut me off when I left the family business. I'd been on my own since, and I liked it that way. The next day, my parents showed up at my apartment unannounced, 6 p.m., right as I got home. Dad was in a suit, Mom in a tailored blazer, both looking like they'd stepped out of a boardroom. "We need to settle this," Dad said, not sitting down. Mom perched on my couch, hands folded. "Clara's a lovely girl, Ethan. This is about securing the future, yours, ours, the business." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "I'm not marrying someone I don't know." Dad's face hardened. "You're being selfish. Victor's firm is expanding. A partnership with us means millions in contracts, new stores, stability." I shook my head. "That's your dream, not mine." Mom's voice was softer, pleading. "We just want what's best for you." I looked at her. "Then let me choose my own life." The argument went in circles. Dad brought up my dead-end job. Mom mentioned how lonely I must be. Finally, Dad laid down the ultimatum. Agree to the engagement by the end of the month, or they'd cut me out completely. No inheritance, no trust fund, no contact. "You'll be on your own," he said, like I hadn't been for years. I didn't flinch. "Fine." They left without another word, the door clicking shut like a guillotine. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, piecing together what I was up against. My parents weren't bluffing. The trust fund, set up by my grandfather, was worth $1.2 million, meant to kick in when I turned 30 next year. I'd never counted on it, but losing it stung. More than that, I knew they'd use their connections to make my life harder. Clients, landlords, maybe even my job. Victor Hargrove's real estate firm owned half the commercial properties in Boise, including the warehouse where I worked. A bad word from him and I could be out of a job. I started planning, quietly, carefully, the way I'd learned to navigate my parents' world. First, I checked my lease month to month, easy to break. I called my boss, Sarah, and asked about my job security. She was blunt. If Hargrove leans on the owners, you're gone. Nothing personal. I thanked her and hung up. Next, I dug into my finances. $8,400 in savings, no debt, a used truck in my name, and a storage unit with my grandfather's old tools and some furniture. I opened a new bank account at a credit union, transferred half my savings, and set up alerts for any unusual activity. My parents had co-signed my first car loan years ago. I wouldn't put it past them to meddle. The next week, I met Marcus at his garage. "You're really doing this," he said, sliding out from under a Chevy. "Got no choice," I replied. "They want to cage me. I'm not going willingly." He wiped his hands on a rag. "What's the end game?" I thought about it. "I want my life back, on my terms. And I want them to regret pushing me." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That's a tall order." I smiled, just a little. "I've got time." I started digging into Clara's family. Victor Hargrove was a big fish, owned strip malls, office buildings, even a few apartment complexes. His firm, Hargrove Properties, had a reputation for aggressive deals, sometimes skirting the line. I found news articles about tenant complaints, shady evictions, and a 2018 lawsuit over falsified property appraisals. Nothing stuck, but it painted a picture. My parents' hardware chain, meanwhile, was struggling. Online retailers were eating their lunch, and they needed Victor's contracts to stay afloat. This marriage wasn't just about me, it was a merger, and I was the collateral. 2 weeks after the ultimatum, I got a call from Clara herself. Her voice was calm, professional, like she was scheduling a meeting. "Ethan, I think we should talk. Can we meet?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, but curiosity won. "Sure." Neutral ground. "Coffee shop on Main? Tomorrow? 10 a.m. She agreed. Clara was exactly like her photos. Polished, composed, in a navy dress and minimal jewelry. She ordered a latte, sat across from me, and got to the point. "I don't want this either," she said. "My father's pushing me. Same as your parents are pushing you." I leaned back, surprised. "Then why go along with it?" She sighed. "Because I'm tired of fighting him. He controls my trust fund, my job, my apartment. If I say no, I lose everything." I studied her. She wasn't lying, but she wasn't helpless either. "So what's your plan?" I asked. She shrugged. "Get through the engagement, maybe the wedding, then figure it out. Divorce is always an option." I shook my head. "That's not a plan. That's surrender." Her eyes narrowed. "And what's your big idea? Run away? They'll find you." I didn't answer. I didn't trust her enough to share. We parted on civil terms, but I knew she'd report back to her father. That night, I started phase 2 of my plan. I'd been researching Hargrove Properties, cross-referencing public records, tenant forums, even old court filings. There was a pattern. Victor's firm would buy distressed properties, jack up rents, and push out long-term tenants to flip the buildings for profit. One complex, Willow Creek Apartments, caught my eye. It was a low-income complex, mostly seniors and single parents, bought by Hargrove 6 months ago. Tenants were already facing eviction notices, despite paying rent on time. The local paper had a small story about it, buried on page 8. I drove to Willow Creek the next day, a gray Saturday morning. The complex was run down. Peeling paint, cracked sidewalks, but the people were real. I knocked on doors, introduced myself as a concerned citizen, and listened. An older woman, Mrs. Delgado, invited me in for tea. "They want us out by Christmas," she said, showing me the eviction notice. "I've lived here 15 years. Where am I supposed to go?" Others told similar stories. Rent hikes, Maintenance ignored. Threats from Hargrove's property manager. I took notes, photos, and copies of documents they shared. Back home, I emailed a reporter from the Boise Chronicle, Lauren Pierce. I'd read her work. Sharp, investigative, not afraid to take on big names. I kept it vague. I have information about Hargrove properties and tenant abuses. Can we meet? She replied within an hour. Name the time and place. We met at a diner off the record. I handed her a folder, tenant statements, eviction notices, and a timeline of Hargrove's purchases. This is good, she said, flipping through it. But I need more. Proof of intent. Internal documents. I nodded. I'm working on it. The next day, my parents escalated. Dad sent a text. Meet us at the house this weekend, or we start proceedings to freeze your trust fund. I didn't respond, but I called my grandfather's old lawyer, Tom Reynolds. He was retired but owed my family a favor. Can they do that? I asked. Tom sighed. The trust has a clause, family welfare. Vague enough they could argue it in court. You'd need to fight it, and that's expensive. I thanked him and hung up. I wasn't surprised, but it lit a fire under me. I started tailing Victor's property manager, a guy named Derek Wells. Public records showed he'd been with Hargrove for a decade, handling the dirty work. I followed him from the office to Willow Creek, watched him slap eviction notices on doors, heard him yell at a tenant over the phone. On a hunch, I checked his social media, sloppy mistake. Derek posted photos of a new boat, a Vegas trip, things a mid-level manager shouldn't afford. I saved screenshots, wondering where the money was coming from. Then came the break. Marcus, who had contacts in shady places, put me in touch with a guy named Ray, an IT freelancer who solved problems. I met Ray at a coffee shop, cash in hand. I need access to Hargrove Properties' internal server, I said. Emails, financials, anything on Willow Creek. Ray raised an eyebrow. That's not cheap, and it's not exactly legal. I slid $2,000 across the table, half my savings. Can you do it? He pocketed the cash. Give me a week. While Ray worked, I kept up appearances. I went to work, dodged my parents' calls, even met Clara again. She was more guarded this time, asking what I was planning. Nothing, I lied. Just figuring out my options. She didn't buy it, but she didn't push. I wondered if she was playing her own game, maybe feeding info to Victor. It didn't matter. I was moving faster. Ray came through 6 days later. We met in his car, parked behind a strip mall. He handed me a USB drive. Emails between Victor and Derek, plus financials. Willow Creek's a goldmine for them. They're faking repair costs to justify evictions, then selling to a shell company Victor owns. Classic scam. I plugged the drive into my laptop. The emails were damning. Victor instructing Derek to clear out the dead weight at Willow Creek. Derek confirming tenants out by Q1. Sale closes Q2. There were spreadsheets too, showing inflated maintenance budgets, funneled to an account tied to Derek's boat payments. I sent everything to Lauren Pierce, encrypted with a note. This is what you needed. Run it. 2 days later, her story hit the Chronicle's front page. Hargrove Properties accused of tenant harassment, fraud. It detailed Willow Creek, named Victor and Derek, and included tenant quotes I'd gathered. Social media exploded. Tenants sharing their stories, activists calling for investigations. By noon, the state attorney general's office announced a probe. My parents called that night, furious. What have you done? Mom shouted. Victor's a friend. I stayed calm. I didn't do anything. Maybe Victor should have been more careful. Dad took the phone. You're throwing away your future. Clara's done with you, and so are we. I hung up. Clara texted an hour later. Was this you? I didn't reply. The fallout was swift. Victor's firm lost contracts. Tenants filed a class action lawsuit. Derek was arrested for fraud, caught trying to flee to Mexico. Lauren's follow-up story linked Victor to 3 other complexes with similar schemes. His empire was crumbling, and my parents' dreams of a merger were dust. They stopped calling, stopped texting. The trust fund was frozen as promised, but I didn't care. I'd already let it go. I wasn't done, though. Victor had hurt people. Mrs. Delgado, families, seniors, and my parents had backed him, tried to sell me to save their business. I wanted them to feel the consequences, not just lose a deal. I dug deeper, using Ray's access to Victor's server. I found a folder labeled Partnerships. Inside were emails between Victor and my father dating back 2 years. They'd planned the marriage as early as 2023, before I even knew Clara's name. Worse, there were drafts of a contract giving Hargrove Properties a 30% stake in my parents' hardware chain, signed the day after my parents' ultimatum. My father had already started the merger, betting I'd cave. I sent the emails to Lauren, along with a tip: check my parents' business filings. She found discrepancies, loans taken against the hardware chain, collateralized with inflated property values from Hargrove's appraisals. The Chronicle's next story was brutal. Local hardware chain tied to Hargrove fraud. Creditors came knocking, and my parents' stores started closing, one by one. For the final blow, I contacted the tenant's lawyer, a woman named Anita Shah. I shared everything: Victor's emails, Derek's financials, my parents' contract. This could seal the class action case, she said. You're a hero to these people. I shook my head. Just doing what's right. The lawsuit settled for $4.8 million, most of it from Victor's liquidated assets. Mrs. Delgado sent me a card. Thank you, Ethan. We're staying in our homes. Clara called me a month later. You destroyed my father, she said, voice flat. Was it worth it? I thought about it. He destroyed himself. So did my parents. I just turned on the light. She hung up. I never heard from her again. My parents' business collapsed by summer. They sold their house, moved to a condo in Portland. I didn't reach out. They'd chosen power over me, and I'd chosen freedom over them. The trust fund was gone, tied up in their bankruptcy, but I was fine. I'd saved enough to move, taken a new job in Missoula, Montana, managing a distribution center. The pay was better, the air cleaner. I rented a cabin outside town. 1 bedroom, big windows, a view of the mountains. Marcus came to visit, brought a 6-pack and his toolbox. You did it, man, he said, cracking a beer. Took 'em all down. I shrugged. Wasn't about taking them down. It was about taking my life back. Sometimes I thought about my parents, wondered if they regretted it. I didn't hate them, didn't feel much at all anymore. They'd made their choices and I'd made mine. One night, I got an email from Anita Shah. The tenants want to honor you at a community event. Will you come? I drove back to Boise, stood in a community center as Mrs. Delgado and others thanked me. They gave me a plaque, simple wood, my name carved in it. I hung it in my cabin, next to a photo of my grandfather's tools. Victor Hargrove pleaded guilty to fraud. Got 7 years. Derek got 5. My parents never faced charges, but their legacy was gone. As for me, I was building something new. Quiet days, honest work, a life that was mine. I started volunteering with a tenant advocacy group, helping others fight back. It wasn't much, but it felt right. One evening, sitting on my porch, I got a letter from a kid in Willow Creek, a teenager whose mom had been one of the tenants. You gave us a home when no one else would, he wrote. I want to be like you someday. I read it twice, then pinned it to my fridge. Some nights, when the past felt too heavy, I'd look at that letter and know I'd done something real. I didn't plan to be a hero. I just wanted to be free. But sometimes, fighting for yourself means fighting for others. And sometimes, the best revenge is building a life no one can take away.